Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, let's talk about docks, because docks, in my opinion, are the absolute perfect type cover for fish during the spawning cycle. So anywhere from pre-spawn to post-spawn, and then, of course, the actual act of those fish being on the beds and spawning, docks really have it all. They've got cover for those fish to be able to feel secure and ambush prey. They got lots of shade, and then you also have those hard objects, those posts, those dock posts for those fish to be able to rub up against, those big females to loosen up the eggs. Docks are absolutely perfect. So I just want to kind of go through, what type of docks I look for, and also, what parts of the docks I tend to focus on throughout the spring. Okay, so first we'll start off with the pre-spawn. So pretty much the type of docks that I'm gonna be choosing this time of year are the same throughout. From pre-spawn to post-spawn. It may change once those fish are starting to move out towards like the main lake during the summer patterns. But generally speaking, you're looking for docks that have they're placed in the back of spawning areas. So if you have a spawning bay, a spawning pocket or something like that, it's usually going to be the last few docks leading into that pocket that tend to be the best. So the docks that are closest to where those fish are eventually going to spawn. And usually you're talking about docks that are on banks that aren't very steep. So having good mapping this time of year for finding good docks is really critical. So usually if I have a creek that maybe on one side there's a channel swing, usually that channel swing side is going to be the best time or the best place to find fish. So I might be fishing, docks that are around channel swings the rest of the season, but during the spring, I want the docks that are a little bit shallower. So I'll go on the more tapering sloping side as opposed to the creek channel side that's a little bit steeper. So this time of year, if you have a dock that is in 2 to 5 foot of water, oh my gosh, that is perfect. That's like the perfect depth range for spawning docks. And what I really like to look for is docks that have that 2 or 3 foot around the walkways. So the posts are in that 2 to 3 foot range. The first few posts, that's kind of going to be key for when the fish are on the bed. Another thing that I like to look for is docks that especially like floating docks at the end. So you have good walkways where you have the posts leading out. Sometimes you have a dock that has a ramp that really is just kind of suspended. There's no dock posts going down into the water. Those aren't going to be as good during the spawn. But if you have a dock that the walkway has those posts, embedded into the ground all the way to the actual main dock, and then you have a floating dock at the end, to me, that's one of the best scenarios overall, because you've got the spawning bass at the very end, and you can fish around it pretty effectively. You're not gonna snag as much. You can throw a swim jig or a wacky rig worm around those docks, and so I do like my floating docks that have the traditional walkways with the posts, towards the bank, but at the end, you've got the floating docks. And another reason I like floating docks a lot is because they present like complete shade, because there's no gap between, the surface and the dock, like a dock that is just on posts. And so you've got complete shade underneath those floating docks. And there's also a lot of algae growth on a lot of these docks, which just creates its own little ecosystem. There's lots of bluegills that like to hang around those type of docks and that sort of thing. But I'm not saying that a traditional, dock that actually has dock posts even out to the main part of the dock isn't going to be good. I really like those floating docks the most. But, find those docks that are on gradually sloping contours. Using Navionics maps is a really good way to find those. And then make sure that they're docks that have, you know, the good structure for those fish to actually create beds on. And then, you know, other than that, those are kind of the key factors that I'm looking for. But so this time of year, what I like to do is, generally speaking, if I know all the fish are already on the beds, so the majority of the fish are on the beds, and so I'm fishing for bed fish, I like to focus on those walkways. So the first few posts leading out to the main part of the dock, that's where the fish are going to generally spawn. The reason that bass like to spawn on you know, objects such as stumps or dock posts or things like that is because I don't think that these fish want to protect 360 degrees of their bed. I think they just want to protect what's in front of them. So make their bed around something like a stump or a dock post. They can back up against that object and protect what's in front of them as opposed to 360 degrees. So that's the reason why fish really love making their beds around dock posts. And so those first few sets of posts are definitely going to be key. So fishing baits like wacky rigs, like I mentioned before, wacky rig, you know, stick baits like a Zinkers is a really big deal. You know, Z-Man came out with a color recently called Game Changer that is a really, really killer color for most of the country. I think most people know this type of color as baby bass. The Z-Man one's just a slight bit different, but it looks absolutely perfect for this time of year. You can also like pitch a jig around dock posts, things that are slow moving where you're essentially just fishing it through a bed. You may see the fish there, or you may just be hoping that there's a fish there. But either way, you want a bait that's going to pretty much stay in that strike zone for a long period of time. So when the fish are spawning, they're on those posts underneath those walkways. But when the fish are, before the fish are moving up and after they spawn, a lot of times the ends of the docks are going to be the key at that point. So once, you know, a scenario that I love to talk about, it's a story I love to talk about from years ago, moving here to Lake Chickamauga. You know, the fish were just starting to hit the bed. I could feel it. You know, the weather was starting to get warm, and I just knew that it was about to go off. And I went out and started fishing this line of docks that was heading into the back of this spawning bay. And right as I got to like the fourth dock towards the back, I saw this like school of big fish. There was like 4 or 5 really big fish under this dock, but they were kind of positioned like carp, that, you know, that you would see suspended underneath this dock. And I was looking at them, and then I realized those are bass. Those are big pre-spawn females that had just probably got underneath that dock right before they were going to move on to the beds that were in this area. And there was like 40 to 45 pounds of largemouth under that dock with just 4 or 5 fish. They were all between like 8 and probably 11 pounds. It was the craziest thing. Never ended up catching a fish under that dock. The next dock I caught an 8-pounder. But it was just crazy because every time I'd come back to that one dock, you'd see them there. I'd skip my wacky rig in there, and they just kind of like, you know, duck down out of sight. But even though I didn't catch those fish, you know, that just kind of illustrates how important docks are to pre-spawn a largemouth this time of year, especially those big females. So swim jigs, the wacky rig is still going to play a big role. But those are my 2 favorites. Swim baits are also really good this time of year, you know, fishing around the ends of docks. But yeah, so not only pre-spawn, but also post-spawn. And post-spawn, I don't think it's as good for the big females as it is in the pre-spawn when you have that small window when they just move under those docks before they hit the beds. But post-spawn, there's something else that happens is once those males move off the beds with those newly hatched fry, they become fry guarders. They're sitting there for, you know, a week or so, and they're protecting those big schools of fry. And so one of the perfect places that you'll see a lot of these fry balls is at the edges of the ends of the docks. So the corners of the ends of these docks are where you're going to see these fry. And usually they're right at the edge of the shadow line. Okay, so when you see them, they're usually at the corners, but also right at the edge of the shadows. And so they're a really good place for the fish or the fry to hang out. And then the male is probably right underneath that dock, just kind of protecting, waiting to dart out and chase something away. So the fry garters, fish in docks for those, nice 2.5, maybe even 3 pound males, that time of year is a really good pattern because they're really vicious. They eat your bait with reckless abandon, and they're pretty easy to catch. But overall, those are just some of my thoughts on fishing docks this time of year. Docks are my favorite cover this time of year, honestly, for most of the lakes around here, especially on the TVA, and really around the country. They offer all the things that the bass need this time of year, and man, they're just fish catching machines. But anyways, guys, let me know what your thoughts are on dock fishing and this topic in the comment section below. If you guys want to support this channel, make sure you ask questions. I love answering questions in video form. So make sure you ask a question. And also, on the videos that I do have affiliate links in the description, you can use those affiliate links to get 10% off of your order on the products that I talked about. And it kind of comes back to me and helps support this channel as well. And also make sure you like, share, subscribe. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you out on the water.